Nobody goes broke from one bad month. It happens from a handful of decisions you made in your 20s and 30s that felt completely reasonable at the time. This could be a job you stayed in too long, a car you didn't need, or even a pile of cash that felt safe rather than smart. None of it shows up on your net worth as a mistake. It just shows up 20 years later, 30 years later, 40 years later as a gap between where you are and where you could have been. In this video, I'm going to walk you through the wealth killers that don't get talked about enough, and by the end, you'll know which ones are already working against you. Stay tuned. Okay, the first one is a stagnant salary. So loyalty feels like a virtue up until you look at your pay stub. So if you stay somewhere for a decade collecting standard 3% annual raises and $60,000 a year barely gets to 70. I get why people don't push back. I didn't either early on in my corporate career. Asking your boss for more money feels like rocking a boat that you can't afford to tip over. But companies are not sitting around trying to pay you more money than they have to. Duh, they're in the business to make money. So LendingTree's research on this found that job switchers have historically earned about 11% more on average, sometimes north of 30% depending on the industry. And I'll be completely honest with you though, that gap has been shrinking. A 2026 analysis from Bank of America found that in today's slower hiring market, the switching premium has narrowed a lot, and for the very highest earners, staying put now actually pays better than jumping. So don't treat job hopping as an automatic win, but what you should be doing is trying to make upward moves career-wise, not just lateral ones. So again, if you're trying to make these job hops, make sure that you're moving up the staircase, not sideways. But for most people in the first decade of their career, staying quiet and staying loyal is usually still the more expensive choice. Okay, number 2 is the zip code tax, aka your earnings ceiling. So where you plant yourself in your 20s quietly sets a ceiling on everything that follows. Median household income varies significantly between metro areas of similar size, sometimes by tens of thousands of dollars a year, according to census data. That's not the cost of living catching up to you. Yes, this could be a medium cost of living versus the high cost of living metro, but that's just what the local job market is willing to pay for the same exact skill set. So your very first salary becomes the anchor for every negotiation after it too. Obviously, you don't have to disclose what you've been making, but it does start to compound in a way people don't expect. This isn't about telling you to uproot your entire life. Obviously, friends, family, community, all the intangibles and non-financials matter, but it's about knowing that staying somewhere purely out of comfort in a market that structurally caps what you can earn is a decision with a big price tag attached, even if nothing bad ever happens to make you notice it. So again, make sure, even if you are in a low or medium cost of living metro, if you want to call it that, you need to realize that you could have the same job, same skills, same responsibilities, and be earning significantly more if you live somewhere that's a little bit bigger or more expensive. If you look at a city like San Diego, for example, sometimes the same jobs pay less, okay, because they call it the sunshine tax. But if you compare like someone working in finance in the Midwest versus someone working in finance in New York, you have to figure out if this high cost of living or if the salary offsets this high cost of living and actually nets you a positive. So be careful where you live and what jobs you take. Okay, number 4 is your thick cushion. Thick cushion. Is it thick with 2 C's, thick with 4 C's? What I'm talking about is your cash. So this one sneaks up on people who are actually trying to do the right thing by being conservative with the emergency fund. So the standard advice is typically to save 3 to 6 months of expenses for emergencies, and I actually agree with that and advocate for it if you've been watching my channel over the years. So what I did was I drew a bathtub. So this line right here is the water at 6 months. This line right here is the water overflowing out of the bathtub with 16 months saved. Okay, but I know people sitting on 80, 100, even close to $200,000 in a savings account because the size of that number makes them feel safer. So you run the math on $4,000 a month in expenses, 6 months gets you to $24,000, 16 months gets you closer to $64,000. That's a $40,000 gap sitting in cash instead of being invested in the market. So if you invest that difference at a historical market return instead of parking it at a savings rate of a high yield savings account, for example, over 20 years, you're looking at roughly $144,000 left on the table in opportunity cost. So past a certain point, an oversized emergency fund isn't just a precaution, it's a fear wearing this like balance sheet, budgeting spreadsheet facade over it, okay? So you need to be careful with this. I do still advocate if you are a 100% commission salesperson or a majority of your income comes from one source, like like commissions, for example, that aren't guaranteed, Or if you're a small business owner, for example, you should probably have close to 12 months of savings and emergencies saved. The next one is the biggest wealth killer on this list, in my opinion. But before that, here's a word from today's sponsor, Policy Genius. Summer's coming up and I've got a lot going on with my girls, trips, long weekends, and backyard time with the family. But before all of that, I knocked one important thing off my plate that gave me a lot of peace of mind heading into the season. We spend a lot of time talking about building wealth on this channel, but there's another side of that story most people ignore until it's too late, and that's protecting what you've already built. I've got 2 little girls and a house. The older they get, the more I think about this. If something happened to me tomorrow, they'd still need to be taken care of. That's not a fun thing to think about, but it's a real thing to think about. Life insurance is the answer to that problem, and the reason most people don't have it or don't have enough of it is that they assume it's expensive or complicated to figure out. Policy Genius is a marketplace that lets you compare life insurance quotes from America's top insurers in just a few clicks. They lay out your options clearly, coverage amounts, prices, terms, there's no guesswork. Their licensed agents walk you through the whole thing and handle all the paperwork. With Policy Genius, you can find 20-year life insurance policies starting at just $276 a year for $1 million in coverage. That's less than $1 a day to make sure your family doesn't lose everything if you're not around. Protect the life you've built. Head to policygenius.com/whiteboardfinance or click the link in the description to compare free quotes and see how much you could save. That's policygenius.com/whiteboardfinance. Divorce is probably the biggest wealth killer on this list, and that is number 4 right here. 50-50 life, meaning splitting a life in half. So divorce doesn't just cost you emotionally. It takes a half of your balance sheet away. Imagine working hard and saving your entire marriage only for everything to be cut in half. Outside of that, there are the legal fees, and depending on how contested things get, that alone can run $20,000 or more. The hidden costs are worse. Say you have to refinance a shared home at whatever rate happens to be available that year. Splitting retirement accounts through a court order, sometimes triggering taxable events or penalties along the way. Moving costs, furniture, and if a business is involved or built during the marriage, untangling ownership gets complicated fast. Added up, and $50,000 to $100,000 isn't a stretch just in costs alone. So, and the odds are only get worse after the first marriage. Take a look at this right here. Second marriages fail at around 60%, third marriages at 73%. So who you build a life with is one of the biggest financial decisions you'll make, and no amount of good investing habits fully offsets getting that one wrong. Okay, number 5 is driving you broke, AKA a car. So I own 2 cars that I genuinely enjoy, so I'm not gonna sit here and pretend cars don't mean anything to people, but I also know exactly what a car payment does to a household budget because insurance, maintenance, and depreciation never show up on the sticker price. New vehicle prices hit a record high in 2026, north of $51,000 on average, which puts a typical payment around $750 a month before anything else gets added on. A reliable used car, something a few years old with reasonable mileage, runs closer to $530 a month, okay? So that gap, a bit over $200 invested over 10 years at a normal market return, lands around $40,000. $40,000 just for choosing the car that's already broken in. At some point, buying a new car may even make more sense than buying used because of how little used cars have depreciated since 2020, so I definitely get it. I feel like you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. I remember when I was looking at cars, even the certified pre-owned ones were literally like $1,000 less than a new one. So it's like, why wouldn't I just buy the new one with the full warranty and, you know, it being new and all that stuff? So I get it. Both of these are very difficult right now after 2020, especially at the time of this recording. But again, you do have to take into consideration that $220 a month on average savings. Okay, number 6 is looking versus actually being rich, okay? The most expensive habit in personal finance isn't a purchase, it's a comparison. And here's a friendly reminder, comparison is the thief of joy. It's natural to measure your life against your neighbor's driveway or somebody's social media feed, but the moment you do, you've already lost the plot because you're not actually seeing their finances, you're seeing what they chose to show you. Their leased car looks the same as a paid off one from the outside. The apartment that looks impressive online can be 60% of someone's take home pay. The people who actually build wealth over a decade or 2 decades or 3 decades tend to look boring while they're doing it. So staying in your lane while everyone else performs theirs is one of the least glamorous, most effective financial decisions you can make. Remember to be yourself because everyone else is already taken. I sleep well at night knowing that I have no debt. It's easy to get confused or jealous of others who may seem to be doing better than you, but the reality is sometimes their entire life is leased. Their entire persona is rented. So everything is fake and they're literally living month to month, sometimes even week to week. What I do want to preface is that in personal finance, especially online, people always make fun of people that have, the watch, the car, the clothes, the house, the vacation. But guess what? Some of these people genuinely are rich and they genuinely earn these things and they are doing well financially. So I don't want to poo-poo on everybody that's doing these things, but at the end of the day, you need to be cognizant of yourself and your own financial situation. Okay, number 7 is cash versus equity. What do I mean by this? If you're ever offered equity as part of a job, especially somewhere early stage, the instinct is almost always to take more cash with a higher salary instead, especially if you're expecting a kid on the way or maybe your middle career. Obviously, if you're late career and you're already financially independent, take the equity, take the upside. If you're early career and you don't have any dependents, you can take on more risks, take the equity. I understand why some people do this, okay? More cash feels safer in the moment and it lets you upgrade your life a little bit right now. But a single strong equity outcome can outperform years of extra salary, and most people never actually run the numbers to see what their equity is worth. This is why it's sometimes better to go to work for a startup or early stage company while you're young and take the equity with the higher, albeit riskier upside. So here's how to calculate it in very simple, high-level YouTube terms, okay? So first, figure out what percentage of the company your shares represent. Your HR or legal team can give you the total share count. And second, get a realistic sense of what the company might be worth down the line. Own 0.1% of a company that eventually sells for $100 million, and that stake is worth $100,000. That doesn't mean to chase equity blindly though, because plenty of startups go nowhere, okay? I used to work for a startup. I'm still friends with all the co-founders to this day. We actually ended up getting acquired by a publicly traded company, which was cool, but everyone got laid off after that, so it wasn't cool. But it means actually do the math before assuming that the bigger pay package is bigger than it really is with the equity included. Okay, number 8 is waiting for the perfect entry, staying in cash too long, okay? So staying in cash until the market feels safe again is one of the most expensive habits in investing, and the data on this is pretty clear. Stay fully invested in the market over multi-decade stretch, and $10,000 can turn into close to $200,000. Miss just the 10 best trading days in that same window, and your total gain drops by more than half, down around 56%. If you miss the 20 best trading days, you're down closer to 74%. And if you miss 30, you've given up roughly 84% of this total gain. So that's why all these studies that come out that say, oh, Fidelity's best performing clients are dead, is because they don't mess around with their portfolio. They just stay invested. So the uncomfortable part is that the best days and the worst days, they tend to show up right next to each other, which means people that are trying to dodge the scary part of the market usually end up missing the recovery and the upside too. So unless retirement is close enough that protecting what you've built matters more than actually growing it, staying invested consistently beats waiting for the perfect moment, perfect entry every single time. Okay, so my thoughts at the end of the video, as always, none of these are exotic or sexy or a scam. That's exactly what makes them dangerous. A job that you stayed at too long, a city that capped your upside before you even noticed it, a cash pile that felt super safe, or a relationship that went sour. All of those things can absolutely destroy your net worth in your 20s, 30s, and moving forward for the rest of your life. So that's why if you guys need help, I created this 7-day roadmap. It's absolutely free. Check out the QR code here or the link down below. It's a Google Drive spreadsheet. Just hit file, make a copy, and it's yours for free. And then also, if you want more guidance and handholding for a ridiculously low price of $10 a month or $100 a year, which I do need to raise, it's not a sales tactic. I genuinely think I'm not showing you how much value this really is for this amount of money. We have live streams every Thursday with me. I show you all my trades. I show you everything that I buy and sell. We have a live chat, and we also have 3 full courses on real estate investing, stock market investing, and also on budgeting. It's a ridiculous value. Check out the QR code here or the link down below to Whiteboard Finance University. And then as always, you guys, you don't need to be perfect, okay? You just need to make sure that most of these 8 things that we talked about don't happen to you. Obviously, things like divorce and stuff like that is sometimes out of our control, but for the most, you can control a lot of these outcomes. Thank you so much and have a prosperous day. These ain't loyal. 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 These ain't loyal.